No messing about from me today. I'm merely here to introduce a very special video featuring an interview with the brilliant songwriter and musician, Martin Page. If you know the name, well, consider us friends already, but for those who don't, trust me, you will know his songs. As a songwriter, he's best known for penning the chart toppers We Built the City for Starship, These Dreams for Heart, as well as Go West's King of Wishful Thinking, and his own solo hit, In the House of Stone and Light. But he has writing and production credits with artists as diverse and legendary as Earth, Wind and Fire, Neil Diamond, Tom Jones, and countless others from Robbie Robertson to Robbie Williams. Martin's latest album, The First and Last Freedom, is out now, and you'll soon hear from him all about the creative processes, friendships, and extraordinary musicians who helped shape this new work, and much more besides, including how he came to be paired up with Elton John's legendary lyricist Bernie Taupin in that highly successful songwriting partnership in the 80s. He's thoughtful, funny, honest, and clearly still as passionate about music now as he ever has been. I really hope you enjoy this chat as much as I did, and can put up with my stupid grinning mug being on screen throughout as well. Hey, nothing's perfect in this life, is it? Anyway, please enjoy a conversation with the great Martin Page. There we go. So, Martin, welcome to the channel. Great to have you here, and congratulations on the new album, The First and Last Freedom. Out of the world at last. It's been, at the time that we're recording this, out for a whopping 2 days. So how does it feel to have it out, and how has the early reaction been for it?
You know, Joseph, I think it's the best I've ever felt about putting a record out. I know that sounds strange to say, but it was a long gestation period. I mean, I think it was ridiculously started like 7 years ago in this same room in the studio. And then we went through COVID and everything. So it was a long process. But I feel, getting back to your question, I feel so sort of light in spirit because it was a big project. And it was the first time that we'd released a physical CD for some time on Bandcamp. So it was all new to us, you know, finding a new home. And
can I just say it's very exciting for me that it's going to be the first time in about 15 years that I've had a physical Martin Page album in the house that I'm living in, because In the House of Stone and Light, it's been looked after by my mum, and she's been looking after it for 15 years now.
Your mum is great. Your mum is fantastic. I can tell that. No, it is. It was a thing where, you know, in today's music business, you get to a point when you say downloads, downloads, downloads. And we felt so strong, mainly my manager who pushed me right through this project, mainly because the musicians I was using again were the guys from the album In the House of Stone and Light. And so I really wanted to revere their performances and to see it through the right way. I must admit, I had moments of going, God, this has taken such a long time. And maybe we could just get it online straight away, which I think the temptation is. But my heart is still based back into the 70s and 80s and 90s when albums meant a lot to me. So we did a 24-page booklet and did essays and lyrics and made the CD quite special. And I took a long time thinking about the mastering and the way the record sounded. And so it was brilliant to put out a CD and brought back to me the feelings of what it was to have something tactile in your hand and a mini book, you know. So I still go back, probably like you do, Joseph. I still go back to my favorite records, and I feel them more when I can hold them, open the booklet, look at a vinyl record. I just feel like you own it instead of it passing so quickly down the stream waves, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. It belongs to you in a way.
Yeah.
It comes from the artist to yourself, and it's permanent.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's also a sign of art. You know, I mean, I think some guy from the Oasis said, you know, it's poor man's art to have an art, you know, a vinyl album cover. But it just brought back caring for the music more, you know. It made me feel like we are doing something that's going to last. And I've always had that philosophy that you make an album and that it will last over a period of time. It's not dictated by fashion. And I've been lucky because the songs I've written, you know, over the years have sort of had that lasting period, which means to me that they transcend a little bit of all the fashion changes, and a good song remains a good song and stays there forever. Yeah,
absolutely. I have to admit, I was amused last year when I went back to revisit 30 years of In the House of Stone and Light and saw your original publicity for it, where you said, I hope that people are still listening to this in 2 or 3 years' time. And here
Yeah,
I am 30 years later, still
yeah.
loving it.
Yeah. I mean, I do. I know it sounds corny, but I feel the luckiest man in the world because, I still have the studio. I still feel like a kid creating. And yeah, I mean, even with the Beatles were saying, and I think the Rolling Stones said, well, we hope to last for 5 years or something. So, it comes down to me again, Joseph, to songs, the strength of songs. And that's really where everything's ever come from me from is the creation of the song. And yeah, to think that I get amazed when people point back to House of Stone and Light. I get amazed because I think it was 20 minutes ago. They remind me how long it was. And, people sort of say, I'm in an old people's home now and I bought this record and I was...
Yeah, I don't wish to make you feel old by going on about how long ago that album came out.
No, it's okay. It's okay. But, you get these people writing to you that say, my mum turned me on to this, and I'm now 30 years old and I think it's a great song. So, you're very lucky if you write songs that seem to have this perennial place. I mean, I think These Dreams, King of Wishful Thinking, and We Built the City, and somehow, although it's more underground in the House of Stone and Light, they've sort of remained and held me there. And in fact, I have to say, you know more about me than I know about myself, because once you did that review of House of Stone and Light, I mean, I was watching it like a fan. I was going, oh yeah, that's what we did. All right, yeah. So it's beautiful when people like yourself take the albums into their bloodstream and live it and look at the musicians and players. Because when I grew up, I was a bass player at first. And so I was looking at all the credits on the albums and I was in love with, the American bass players, Louis Johnson and Stanley Clarke, etc. So it's nice even now. When we made it First and Last Freedom, I must admit I was thinking that way. Like I'm making a record that will have everybody will see the musicians. They'll get turned on by the performances, live performances. The players were allowed to express themselves here. And then I would knock their performances into shape over a period of time. And some people recorded in South Africa, like we had a Zulu choir, which was wonderful. And Bill Dillon and Russell Broom Canadian guitarists I'd worked with Robbie Robertson and etc. They were sending me their performances from Canada, and then you were dealing with that on Dropbox and just amazed at what they played. And of course, PJ Moore from the Blue Nile did his work in Scotland for me. So this album, as it went on, became quite big to me. I had to get it right, and we were doing live drums, and I mean most of my albums because I do it myself. So you're playing all the instruments yourself. You're a one-man band. This was
it's been a long time since you've had an album like this. So I know it developed quite slowly and it developed for a special reason, which we'll get into in a moment. But how was it stepping back from being the one-man band and having control over literally every aspect of an album?
Well, it was beautiful for me, and I say the word beautiful because I think maturity says you've learned a lot. So the story of this album was I was going to have Jimmy Copley, the drummer that played on In the House of Stone and Light. I was going to bring him across 7 years ago to play with me again, and it wasn't for an album. I just thought, I love this drummer. We're great mates. I'm going to fly him over and he's going to stay with me and we're going to do a few tracks together, 4 tracks. And then it wasn't an album, it was just an idea of us working together. I hadn't even written the songs. And then he let me know that he had leukemia and was in hospital in London, and wasn't a big deal, big deal, but not a big deal. We still thought he was going to come across. He was going to get better. And then his girlfriend said, it's taken a lot longer than we thought. And he's pretty ill, but how about you writing some songs? Because he's such a fan of working on he thinks that what he played on In the House of Stone and Light. Of course, he'd been with Jeff Beck and Paul Rodgers. I felt very honored by that. She said, all right, write some songs for him to lift him in the hospital. So I wrote 4 songs, pure demos to get him going. And it's mentioned that in the album. When you get your album, you'll see that we have the essay in there with even what Jimmy was saying around that time. And it got him out of hospital, and the songs got him going, and he was excited, and he sent a video of him playing. And unfortunately, the bone marrow transplant didn't make it. And he rang me and said, I can't go over to it, you know. So we started these tracks. And then at the same time, Joseph, Jack Hughes, one of my good friends, Wang Chung, his wife had just died of cancer. And I thought, I'm writing these songs to have my friends around me. So Jack was in town, and he came across us. I got 4 songs I'm writing for Jimmy Copley, jam with me. And Jack said, these are the best songs you've ever written, you know, there's something special about him. And he's a hard judge of me. And all of a sudden, it just appeared that this album was appearing, and I was writing songs for my mates to get better. I always, you know, to lift their spirits, just to get them going and realize that music heals you. And suddenly,
exactly. I mean, something I've firmly believed for a long time is that the healing power of music is something that's possibly intangible, but it is very real.
It's very real, Joseph. I've lived it. You know, I'm a veteran now. I've lived it. I've seen it. I felt it. So, you know, so Jack was over here in this room jamming, playing guitar, and we're all just feeling it. And unfortunately, Jimmy couldn't make it over, and he gave me a call just before he passed, and he was so brave and so strong. There's a song on the album called Your Whole Heart, because I was driving over Mulholland Pass, coming back late from my manager's office, and he called me from hospital and said, I'm not going to make it, and this is my last calls to my friends, and music is everything to me, and I love you and all that. And it was like, if I could only be an inch of that bravery. And that inspired me to say, let's go forward and finish a record in the honor of really Jimmy, because it was that's what inspired it. And then Neil Taylor from Tears for Fears, he was in town. All the musicians that had played on House suddenly descended onto LA at the same time. And we just thought.
So was there a point where you realized that, hang on, I've got just about everybody, who are the missing pieces that I can contact and complete the puzzle? I mean,
it was strange, Joe.
I know, sadly, of course, it's not just Jimmy who's not there, because obviously Phil Collins is not someone who's able to appear on an album these days. And of course, the great Robbie Robertson, who made such a contribution to the title track of that debut. But otherwise, you've got the band back together effectively.
You're absolutely very true, Jesse. If I could have got Robbie, and if Phil was working, I would have no doubt reached out. The rest of the people were still, it seemed, were moving around. Jeffrey Oriema, or he'd left us as well. But it felt like a kindred record. And of course, it was a live record. So for me, it was just like, I'm gone back to that era where we're making a live record. And I started to realize that it was really helping my voice. It was great to play with a drummer, and the backbeat of the snare really affected me. And as I was working in the studio, I was thinking, I haven't felt this for a long time. In the funny place for me, in my mind, what took the place of Robbie Robertson was Ray Parker Jr. I played on Ghostbusters years ago, and suddenly we were meeting him again, me and Brian, who worked with him. And he said, whenever you're doing an album, I'd love to play on it. And there was Ray Parker playing on 2 of the tracks, Little Bird and Simplicity. And I never really realized, Joseph, what a great session player he was. Steve Wonder, Toto and Boss Skaggs and everything, Barry White. And so he sat down and played on these 2 tracks, and it was phenomenal, and so in a way, I know this sounds strange, I've never thought of this before, is that there's always a player on the album, like Phil Collins or Robbie Robertson, that you are of another level. And Ray Parker certainly is that. And so he sort of slipped into that place. I just sent the album to him yesterday, and he was like, wow, I didn't know I played that good. It was terrific. But, it's a lovely... Sorry, go ahead, Joseph.
No, you carry on.
No, I just said
at any point.
Yeah, it was like a bit like going back to the football team you used to play, and it's like, oh, this is the 11 that used to play in 1966. We're missing 3 or 4, but it's the same team. And it's amazing after all these years, the players all played. And of course, Brian Fairweather from my band, Q Phil, he again was playing guitar, and Trevor Thornton from my band, Q Phil, he played drums all through the album, which was a joy to me because, you know, he was my original drummer back in the 80s, and Jimmy Copley knew him and actually gave him a message saying, go and take over my seat and do a great job. So it was, and Trevor said, I can feel his spirit. I can feel Jimmy's spirit on the session, and I want to do the greatest job I can in the rhythm section. And getting back to the first thing you asked me is, I feel really light of soul because it's a project based on goodness. You know, we were trying to lift the players' moods, even when Jack was playing on these tracks. He said, well, when did you write these? I said, these are the demos to get Jimmy out of hospital, which they did. He did come out of hospital and rehearse the tracks. And even then, I didn't think it was an album. I thought they were tracks for us to meet up again on, you know, shake hands and feel
just
good.
to play as friends and not think
Yeah,
about it in a
totally.
career kind of point of view. Just
absolutely. The whole project's been like that. I took a long time because I felt under pressure to mix it and organize all the musicians' parts carefully. And I wasn't sure I was going to master it, you know, hit it hard to the ball, loud. I think I've done a video about that. And then I listened to those records that we've always loved, you know, from certain periods. And I thought, no, I want this to be dynamically musical. And you can play it loud or quiet in a phone or in a big studio and still feel the emotion of it. So it was like making a record the thing I was trying to get to there was that I was amazed at how well the players still played. You know, we all get older and we go like, the finger's going to work. And everybody was a drummer and, you know, pull more on keyboards. It's great ideas. And so, you know, I think it's a funny thing. I think I learned that you can age and you can just in some ways get worse because you maybe lose an octave on your voice, but you sing better because you're in control of your emotions. And I feel my voice now is as strong as it's ever been. Not with octave wise, but with expression. And the players were the same. You know, they played performances that made it hard for me. Bill Dillon sent 28 guitar tracks from Canada. I said, thank you, Bill. I'll spend a couple of months comping this. Thank you. And everything was good. You know, so the hardest thing was deciding what really worked for the songs. You know, it wasn't like that's a bad guitar track. Yeah. We use this one. It was like, everybody's playing from their soul. They're playing from my voice, which was a lot of them were phonetic vocals. So their performances are soulful. I've really got to analyze this and put the time in. So, yeah, I feel very light of heart at the moment, and a little bit of joy. I mean, at this late stage, not that I expect it to plow the world down and be, you know, a #1 seller. I just think over time, my favorite records by Elton John, like Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, they used to settle into me over a period of time. I knew something was good about it, but after a time I go like, good God, this is really good. And I used to find that with Elton's albums. And I think, you know, not being big-headed about it, I think this record is ingrained with a time code again, that its strength will go over time, you know.
I can definitely feel that. I've obviously not got the physical album yet, but I've had the download from release day. So I've had, I think, 3 listens to it now. And I can see that it is going to do exactly what you say and just keep growing. And you're going to hear different things and new things for a long time to come.
Yeah, I'm very pleased you said that because I know when I was a real fan of, again, I have to say Elton John, whenever I got his albums, I knew there was a complexity when I listened to it and felt it, but I couldn't quite grasp it where the hooks were. I just knew it was good. And then maybe after a month of playing it, like Joni Mitchell, you know, I'd go like, oh my God, this is just so good, you know. And I'm not saying that's here, but I do have a feeling that it, as we just said, it has a time code to it, that a year from now, someone's going to hear Your Whole Heart, which is written for Jimmy and all people that were suffering with recovering from cancer, terminal cancer. It was written for that vibe, and they're not depressing songs. I think you probably realize they're not like we were up with our tempos, which is quite hard to do when you're my age. We were all like, come on, we've got rhythms here. You know, I'm a bass player. Let's get the rhythms going. But the soul of it and the chords and the choral sense of it was very Emotional. I suppose that's the best way to put it. You
Oh,
don't want
definitely. And
to.
I know you
Yeah,
did a video on your Facebook page about your whole heart, and I think I messaged you and said that's going to be an
yeah.
emotional one, isn't it? I'm not sure I'm ready for that.
That's
And
right.
it did affect me. It did make me cry, but in the
I'm
best way
glad. I'm
possible.
glad
So
you cried in a good way. And in fact, Jack Hughes was in touring with Wang Chung. He was in the South, and he gave me a call. And I thought, I wonder why he's calling me. And he just called me to say, I saw that video of you talking about your whole heart just walking around the road. And he said, it just moved me because you're talking about friends and players and musicians. You don't. It's rare to connect those things together. That's all he wanted to call me about, which was lovely, you know. And I'm fortunate, Joseph, because make no bones about it. I've had a few hits with lots of different artists, so I'm in that quite luxurious place where I can read, take in things, learn poetry, feel it, and then express myself without thinking, oh, I've got to follow a certain style or whatever. It's more to me, more than me than anything. It's what you said at the beginning. Music has to heal people. You know, it's great to dance. I mean, Little Bird's a funky jam that I wasn't even sure I was going to put on the record because it just happened. And Diane said, we need a break from the emotion on this record. She reminded me that Stevie Winwood would have had, Higher Love, or Peter Gabriel had Sledgehammer. And so in a way, she was fighting for Little Bird, saying it's going to be at the right place to alleviate things and get spirit
it's
up.
perfectly placed in the album. I think sequencing the album is a bit of a lost art, but I think you've done a brilliant job with the sequencing of this
I have to
set
say,
of songs.
that's probably the most I'm proud of about the record is the sequencing, and it happened to me straight away. I put it onto my iPod, the rough mixes, as I was working, and I drove to the Huntington, my favorite place in Pasadena, just to hang out and meditate. And the order I put them in, by mistake, was the album. I never had to work it. It was like I played it on a 30-minute drive and went, oh, that just feels right. And then when we played it to other musicians, they feel they want to play the album to the beginning to the end because it's a flow.
Yeah.
So the sequencing wasn't thought about. It happened. It just happened. And I thought, there it is. And that's very rare.
And that's something for a project that's been over quite a long period. It must have been nice to have something about it that was just so quick for you.
Yeah. That's a great point. It was. That was one of the things we went like, wow, it's done. Sequencing's done. A good 4 years before the record comes out. It's sequenced.
So I'm just getting back briefly to Jimmy. I wanted to know, obviously he played brilliantly in the House of Stone and Light, the song and the album, but was that the first time you worked with him, or how did you two come to meet in the first place?
I'd worked with Jimmy before. That's why I linked onto him. I was producing some tracks for Kurt Smith from Tears for Fears, and Tears for Fears had used Neil Taylor and Jimmy. So when I was working with Kurt Smith, he just said, I've got two musicians that I want to use on the tracks that we're writing together and you're producing. I think we did 3 or 4 tracks. And so they came into my life through Kurt Smith. And then as soon as I worked with them, I was like, my God, these are great players. I mean, Neil is a phenomenal rhythm player, such a creative guitarist. And of course, Jimmy, I don't know if many people know that although he went on, as we say, with Jeff Beck and playing with Paul Rodgers, he was in a band called Muscles, I believe, which was a soul band right back in the 70s. And they played the Southampton Gaumont. I had to remind Jimmy of this in his lifetime. I said, I saw you, a 3-piece, I think they were called Muscles, bass player sang, and they were supporting The Who. And they were as funky as anything, really funky. And I was into funk. So I was like, my God, that drummer. Who would have thought? Many eons later, I'm sat in the studio and I'm going, Jimmy, come, I've seen you before, mate. I've seen you. I've seen you at the Southampton Gaumont. And I said, Muscles. He went, wow, somebody who knows about the band Muscles. And so we hit it off. And of course, he started to work with Go West. And I'd just written the King Wishful Thinking and Faithful. So it was like a family thing there. And when we did House of Stone and Light, you might find this interesting. I used to go into rehearsals just with Jimmy on my own. I would have all the songs and I'd mix them down onto cassettes, and we go into a rehearsal room and we play as a rhythm section on top of the roughs, just him and me for 2 weeks. And so there was a real rhythm section feel. And we loved that feeling. And over the years, he just went through ups and downs in his life emotionally, and he would call me and write to me. And so we became very close through tough times in our lives. But I met him through Kurt Smith, producing Kurt Smith, and Lucky with Neil. Neil was his best friend. So it was like the two of them came together. You couldn't take one without
package deal.
Yes, a package deal. I said, if I give you this money together and I'll bring you both over, could it be just a little bit cheaper? No, we're professionals. You got to pay us a full rate. But yeah, they came as a package deal. Yeah.
Amazing. So you obviously spoke about your love of Elton. So when you were a teenager listening to those albums, could you imagine a future not that far removed from when you were, where you would be the next person writing songs with Bernie Taupin?
No, Joseph. I mean, no. I mean, that's the beauty of getting to this age, doing music. You know, I'm just reading some books about, you know, Phil Lynott from Thin Lizzy and Kurt Cobain from Nirvana, and you just feel you're lucky if music holds you to the golden years where you're still creating, because, you know, I do feel that some of the best stuff's coming out of me in the later years. Bernie was a hero of mine. Growing up in Southampton, and I sensed when I bought Elton John's records that there was the words were different. They had a darkness and a folk feel about them, you know, Tumbleweed Connection. There was something, I just sensed it without knowing. And I wasn't a musician then. I didn't really start playing professional music till I was not 18, 19. And so I was living off of music and records and 45s. And I remember opening the old I think the first record I bought was Tumbleweed Connection, or the Your Song album. But Goodbye Elephant Road knocked me over as a complete double album of just brilliant songs. And I remember reading the lyrics and looking at a picture of Bernie with a white suit jacket on with a butterfly on, and I was going like, wow, so cool, so cool. I mean, you know, they look so good. They look like brothers. And the music, and a Funeral for a Friend, you know, I remember I was into progressive rock as well and everything. And I heard Funeral for a Friend, and I just really revered Elton as well. So when the publishers put us together, when I came to America with a band called Q-Phil, we were doing dance music, very much new wave. So we were like Ultravox and Thompson Twins. We used synthesizers, and all music at that time, Joseph, was having to change. And so all the American record labels were saying, because my track Dancing in Heaven was a big LA hit, they were trying to get all the old acts like the Eagles, like Joni Mitchell, like Bernie, to work with young kids like us. And Bernie said, send me the Q-Phil record, I'll have a listen to it. And so the publisher sent it to him, and he went, yeah, I'll give this a shot. I think he was the only person in the world that ever thought it was decent. And I'm
sure that's not true.
I think it is. But he was into experimenting. And then they said, I'm going to give you 2 tracks to test you out. You know, because I mean, he was a superstar then, and I was this young punk. But we were the new sound. We were the new sound that was breaking the radio. And he sent me these dreams, and we built the city on a fax machine. I wonder if people can remember fax machines. And
that certainly dates the story, doesn't it?
Doesn't it? It's like ticker tape when the football scores come up. You know, Southampton 0, Liverpool 19. Thank you. So I got these lyrics, and I so wanted to impress him that I had a little Jupiter 8, which I've still got here. The same Jupiter 8 sat next to me, and I did 8-track Fostex demos and sent them to him. And he said, Bernie Taupin comes into the 80s, and we became friends, and we had 2 #1 songs straight away. And then I produced his solo record, Tribe, and we became real buddies for about 2 or 3 years, 4 years. He wasn't really working with Elton at that time, and I was kind of the substitute. You know, I was there, and he was working with a young guy. You know, and we had that success you know.
Did that young guy, as you were in those days, having
I was
written
a young guy
two
once.
number one singles just like that, did you think, I've cracked it, every song I write's going to be a hit from here on in?
Oh,
or...
yeah, I still think that. No, I did. There was a time, I think I was interviewed a couple of years ago, and they said, did you feel like at that point, because I was working with everybody, and we were doing well, did you feel like it was, you're in your prime? I did. You know, my house was open, and it was John Waite coming in, Murray White, Earth, Wind and Fire, Commodores, Paul Young, and it was just like a conveyor belt, and I was on form. And I saw it like a football, again, a soccer player, because I used to play soccer as a youth player for Southampton. That I was on form. I was like, yeah, I can do this. And I was like you, I was so into music that whenever I worked with somebody, I knew their albums. So if Go West came, I knew Dancing on a Couch. I knew everything about them. If I was working with Paul Young, I'd grown up watching him with the Q-Tips in London at the event, you know. So I knew them. So whenever I worked with when I worked with Earth, Wind and Fire, I knew all their albums, and I came to the project like a fan, you know. But there was a period, like you say, I think for about 2 years, when I just felt like, throw another one in the studio. Here comes another hit. And another one. I can do an EP of hits, no problem. And you just feel you're in tune, you're in form. And I was listening to the radio all the time, and I was listening to what was happening, and I was in a lot of ways emulating the color of what was happening. So when they'd send an artist to me like Tom Jones, you know, I was like, my God, my mother loved Tom Jones, and I'm producing him, but I was thinking about him doing Kiss. And when I did King of Wishful Thinking with Go West, I was imagining Go West working with Prince. So it's that I was so in tune with knowing records and so in love with it. I was a one-minded guy, you know, a bit like Trevor Horn was through the 80s, one focus.
Right, yeah.
You know, so I did feel, I think what you were saying there, did you think that hits could come? I did. I thought, and actually in those days, my manager, Diane, reminds me that I only wanted to write a song if I thought it was a hit. You know, it was like, no, this isn't a hit, it's a B-side, move it over. And I would write the choruses first. You know, it's very different now. I tend to write purely from, I know it sounds corny, but spiritual and hymnal and choral, and then from the funk, putting rhythm with choral music and folk, and I'm progressive. I've always talk Blue Nile. I've always loved the progressive side of things. I was a big fan of Yes and Genesis in the early years, but now I don't write like I think I'm going to write a hit. I don't think I would know how to write a hit now. I really don't. I think you've got to be living the period, Joe. So I was right in the middle of it.
Oh, absolutely. But
You've got to be
if there was a track, say, on this new album that you could choose and just say, I'm going to have one last massive hit that the world will know, would you be able to pick one? And if so, which would it be?
I think it would be, I'm being real honest here, I think it would be a little bit of a tough decision, because I think it would be it's an album of maybe four strong singles. And I don't think they would be world beaters, but I think in the adult contemporary charts of my time, where House of Stone Light in those days was #1, I think there's Little Bird is a funky, when Jack Hughes heard it, he said smash. And if you don't know, it's a white man singing like, I'm looking for my little bird. So it's like you're listening to Prince. If it was played in Philadelphia late at night, I think a lot of the audience would go, love that track. So I think Little Bird is a urban hit. I really do feel that. Edited, it's long. We jam like Junior Walker. So I think that if I had a record company, they'd be going, we're suspicious, just that's an R&B urban hit, even though you're a white boy singing like Prince. I got a message from a top DJ yesterday, and he thought Simplicity was very strong, and he thought Simplicity. Yeah.
Can I tell you, I like to listen to an album properly from start to finish, but yesterday I was out and about listening to the album, and I got to the point where I'd arrived where I was going, and it happened to be that Simplicity was the last song before I had to stop and wait for 4 hours to hear the rest. But I was singing Simplicity in my head for the next 3 hours.
Yeah. And I've got to say, Joseph, you know, my manager again picked forced me to put that song on again because I thought, well, I'm in a deep space. It's R&B and it's smooth. But she said, no, you don't realize the simplicity is a message as well. We are living in a tough time over the rat race and deals. Anyway, the DJ said to me, he said, what a vocal performance. Like, and it was the first take. And he said, you should be with Hall & Oates on his show, you know, talking about this, because it reminded him of Crowded House. He's a DJ, Crowded House, meeting Hall & Oates and having the Al Green soul thing about it. And it was my manager's favorite track because of the vocal performance. It was a one-off soulful performance. I always think of the people I've worked with who could sing it. It's a great song. It would have been a great song for Paul Young. You know, it's a real mixture of soul. So I'm being told simplicity around the edges. I also think that Courage would have been a very good intro to show. A lot of people put songs out to show what the record's about, and then even if it's not a hit, it gives the people a sense of where they're going. So I think, and this DJ said Courage was very strong. I also believe that Eve, although it's hidden a little bit, is a beautiful sort of third to fourth single. These are the days I'm thinking when there were singles and it was my kind of era. But I do think that Eve, because it's the strength of womanhood, I think it's a very strong chorus and the comfort of the world, you know, and it reminds a little bit of like
it's a very it's a nice antithesis to the whole Andrew Tate movement and that kind of thing. It's the exact opposite of that, and very, very refreshing.
Yeah, so I sort of see that way. I go like, you know, if this was a third or fourth single and I was doing okay, Eve would make a big impact. It has that Badfinger Beatles kind of Elton element about it, which I didn't plan, but it, and on my CP70 piano, it appeared. It was a very short song. I remember when I played it at Ray Parker, he said, this is really good, but you need to extend it past 2 minutes 30. And I was like, I think it's all right, Ray. We're going to do what we keep it like that. So that's me talking from a record company kind of guy. I'd be very influenced to think that Little Bird and Simplicity would make moves into the soul arena, and then I think there is Eve and Courage, and possibly To Feel. I think there's 5 singles if you were doing well, and it was that era. If it was that era,
yeah, exactly. It's
that's
a different era, but I hope people hear the album and love it as much as I know I'm already starting to and going to as it builds. But we're almost done. I knew time would fly, and it has. But before we go, I just wanted to possibly ruin one of your greatest songs for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm leaving now. So it's 40 minutes. It's up. Hi, see ya.
Yeah, thank you, man. No, I'm going to make you do this. I can't believe it, but I'm sure you're aware of, you know, misheard lyrics over the years.
Oh yeah.
And you know, Jimi Hendrix, "Excuse me while I kiss the sky," and all that kind of thing. Are you aware that there's a couple of variations of one in a line from "In the House of Stone and Light"?
Wow, I might be. Is it "Poop in Your Eyes"?
That's the one. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I feel like I have what I mean. Tell me, but that was really good. I mean, I'd seen people saying things, but I remember seeing that somewhere. It's amazing. I can remember that. I'm not as old as you think. Poop in your eyes. Okay.
Well, it's good because I didn't want to really have to be the one to break it to you that people heard it that way.
No, I've seen people say that, I think, and of course, it's a song that has. Who would have had a hit with a song called "In the House of Stone and Light" unless you're Jethro Tull or something? But I'm going to say Havasupai Shaman. Now, Havasupai is the tribe of the Grand Canyon when I've been down there, and I wasn't thinking this would be a hit.
We are going to be out of time, I'm afraid. I'll talk to you forever. I'll wrap up and say thank you so much, Martin Page, and best of luck with the album. I'm sure it's going to be a smash wherever anyone hears it.
Thank you, buddy.
A massive thank you again to Martin for taking the time to speak with me, and to you for watching. Not a bad first guest to have on the channel, right? I have to give a special thanks as well to Martin's manager, Diane Poncher, for helping make this interview happen. Her support behind the scenes is, as you heard from Martin in the interview, truly invaluable. So please do smash that like button if you haven't already, and drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on anything we covered and anything we didn't have time to get to, which was a lot. Make sure to check out the First and Last Freedom either via Bandcamp. The link to Martin's Bandcamp page is in the video description below, or it's also available on Spotify and presumably other streaming giants of your choice. Or if you'd like to hear some tracks from Martin's first solo album back from 1994, and you're somehow not sick of this face yet, you will find my video celebrating that album's 30th anniversary on one side of my head or the other. So I will just say thanks again to all and bye for now, but I hope not for long.
Acting is reacting. This does not mean acting again.